joined by some wonderful guests who have been attending Mountain Connect, the independent broadband show. It's kind of come out of a Colorado framework in the West, but it's really become a quite important and national show. And I'm very, very excited that we are live streaming from Keystone, Colorado at the Mountain Connect conference. I'm Drew Clark. I'm editor and publisher of Broadband Breakfast, and I am very excited to recap a little bit because the show ends in a few hours at noon or 1 here, and we'll be, I'll be heading back to Washington. Other people will be heading back to other places. But before I introduce our guests for this episode of Broadband Breakfast Live Online, I want to just remind everyone that we've got a show every week at 12 noon Eastern Time. We do that so that people can mark their calendars and they can know where to go at 12 noon Eastern Time. Next week, we're going to be talking about broadband mapping and data, part 3, or maybe part 4, or maybe part 44. We've been doing so many of these, and it's a very vital topic. We heard a lot about broadband mapping, the importance of broadband mapping. The week following, we will have Rural Utility Service Administrator Christopher McLean live at Broadband Breakfast for lunch at Clyde's of Gallery Place in Washington, D.C., June 8th. Please sign up to attend. And the week following, we'll be at Fiber Connect, the Fiber Broadband Association's conference in Nashville, Tennessee. So that's just a few of the upcoming events you can look forward to at Broadband Breakfast Live Online. And I also want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors for whom we are very grateful: Utopia Fiber, Broadband.money, Broadband Now, Powerhouse Management, Lightbox, Ookla, Samsung Electronics America, Positron Access, Connect the Future, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and Pinpoint Capital Partners. I want to turn now to our guests. We are joined here remotely by Sharon Gonsalves. Sharon is a senior reporter and editor and researcher, I think. You think you do all three, Sharon. He's at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance's Municipal Broadband Network Initiative, Community Broadband Network Initiative. And we're great friends with Shawn and his colleagues, Rai and Chris, and all the others on the team. They do a wonderful job of capturing the on-the-ground activities of municipal broadband projects. And a frequent guest, glad you could be with us, Shawn. He's at the airport, but he was here at Mountain Connect. To my left is Steve Curran. Steve is a partner or member at Lehrman Center, a law firm in Washington, D.C. And Steve and I have known each other for years, and he is very knowledgeable, and he's been attending Mountain Connect, not for the first time.
Not for the first time, many years. Yeah. Love coming out here.
Thanks for being with us. Also, we have Bob Knight. Bob is the president and CEO of Harrison Edwards, and he's had a nice setup here and at other broadband conferences. We are actually in the Harrison Edwards Media Center, so thank you for letting us use your room. And Bob, of course, has been a keen observer of what's going on in the broadband space and here at Mountain Connect. So thank you for being with us.
Thanks. I'm only sorry that the custodial staff couldn't join you today, so I'll be pitching in for them.
We will be joined by at least one more person, a very important person, Jeff Gawlinski. Jeff is the CEO of Mountain Connect. He's at another session right now, but he's graciously agreed to step in and offer his thoughts on Mountain Connect. So we're going to be reviewing what happened here and what we took from this. So let's turn to you, Shawn. Tell us a little bit about what you took from this conference as opposed to other Mountain Connect or other conferences that you've been at, Shawn.
Well, I mean, I think certainly the primary focus and the energy that was apparent to me was just with the BEAD NOFO, the infrastructure money and the ramping up that we're seeing in the various states to get ready to apply to get that money, and but more importantly to try to understand all of the things that are required that will be required for them to do so. The letter of intent, the initial planning grant applications, the grant applications itself, and so that really I thought was obviously at the center of certainly all day yesterday. I'm sure that conversation will continue into today. Yesterday morning I was Senator Bennett was on. He was in Washington and spoke virtually, and just spoke about sort of his ongoing work and previous work leading up to the passage of the infrastructure bill. And it was interesting listening to him because it was a good reminder of how long some members of the Senate have been working on this. There've been previous bills that had kind of languished. His bill. There was also Congressman Clyburn's bill that had been introduced, I think, a year or two prior to the infrastructure bill, making its way through the sausage making factory in Washington, D.C. And then, but what I thought was really fascinating was hearing Alan Davidson and your discussion with him yesterday, just about the rollout of the BEAD notice of funding opportunity.
Thank you for that summary, and let me just build on what you just said there, Sean. The thing I liked about Michael Bennett's remarks was that he literally drew a through line from complaints that he had been hearing from Coloradans about, broadband speeds are not good enough, or the price is too high, and these kind of complaints that he heard, picking up quite a bit with the pandemic, led him to author a piece of legislation that the Bridge Act, I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but this Bridge Act was a very significant predecessor to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, insofar as it had a focus on allocating money to the states, and also insofar as it focused on getting those speeds higher, right? Making sure that we're not stuck or comfortable or happy with 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. Let's, Sean, any reactions on Senator Bennett, or maybe how that tied into the conversation that I had with Alan Davidson, the head of the National.
No, I think you captured it well. They were, with Alan Davidson, I thought he did relay a couple of interesting tidbits that we can get into.
Okay. Well, hold that thought. Let's hear from Steve and Bob. What are some of your takeaways from being here at Keystone this time around, Steve?
Well, first of all, Drew, as I told you earlier, I thought you did a terrific job talking and getting some good information out of Assistant Secretary Davidson yesterday, and I appreciated hearing some of his responses. The one that kind of stuck with me is that the NOFO is not the end document. It may not be a first draft, but he seemed very open to hearing more from the public and considering ways to maybe change it up based on public participation from all of the stakeholders. And all the stakeholders, as he emphasized, is municipalities, it's local organizations, it's unions, and it's also broadband providers. And I think that this sort of maybe narrowed or focused the dialogue with this document, but I think it's an opportunity for a lot of us to continue to, express where we think things might need to be changed. And I do have some thoughts on that we may get into.
Well, but just a quick follow-up, Steve, how do you see that playing out? I mean, this is a final rule, as I pointed out to him. So how do they adjust a final rule?
I think you just have to engage in whatever advocacy efforts you think will be successful. Meetings with him and the staff, talking to the White House, if that becomes where you think you need to go, writing letters, building public support, finding diversity within your support group. I mean, if they're only hearing from providers about a particular issue, well, that says something. But if it's providers and municipalities that are saying the same thing, that's a bit more broad-based and might have more impact.
Yeah, that's a great point about, there's probably a renewed sense of cooperation between providers, private providers, and municipalities. maybe even 5 or 3 years ago, there was a real kind of open warfare there.
Yeah, I think ARPA has sort of helped to facilitate that, and this kind of takes it to a whole new level. Because ARPA was done a lot of different ways in a lot of different states, and even down to individual communities. But this is going to be, much more structured in a lot of ways. But there's much more accountability, much more give and take. There's challenge processes, more transparency for sure. And those are the kind of things that I think, drive stakeholders to work together.
Drew, I hadn't met Alan Davidson prior to this summit, and I was really struck by, I thought he was really transparent. I thought you to echo Steve's comments, you had a very good interview with him. I thought he was transparent. I thought that he was obviously careful, but he listened. I think that was most important. And I think the biggest takeaway from Mountain Connect this year is that that NTIA is willing to play ball and to listen and maybe make some tweaks. And if I can throw on my other hat, as I'm also a municipal official.
Bob, say just a word about what your first hat is, Harrison Edwards,
Sure.
and what you do and why that's a kind of unique perch in the broadband, and then go ahead and put the other hat on.
Sure. Oh, thanks for that. So Harrison Edwards, right? We're a PR and marketing firm. We represent a lot in the broadband space. It's probably a little more than half of our business now, and represent network operators, ISPs, the full spectrum of that. And we handle a lot of the press, for the industry and customer acquisitions and grant writing, yada, yada, yada. My other hat, I'm a municipal official back home in Richfield, Connecticut, and I serve on the board of AAPB, American Association for Public Broadband. And we have heard from our members already. We came out yesterday, very supportive of the NOFOs, but we've pointed out some unintended consequences of the NOFOs also. And this letter of credit issue is not going to go away. It's a huge issue, particularly, the spirit of the NOFOs and the spirit of the infrastructure bill is to connect the unserved, particularly in rural areas. And, rural areas typically aren't, as economically flush as maybe some of the suburban and our city areas. So, the letter of credit is going to be a really, really big issue, particularly if you don't have a Bank of America or Wells Fargo in that
Right.
community. You're dealing with a small local bank, and this 25% match we're hearing, that's going to be a really big issue. So we at AAPB, we're going to be engaging with NTIA on those issues, and reach out to Sarah Morris and some others there to really make sure that our members or points of view are being heard.
We certainly want to come back and cover more about BEAD, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, which is the bulk, the $42.5 billion bulk of Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But I want to just quickly ask Steve here, because this conference, and I've been to it before, you've been to it before, there's traditionally been a real wireless presence, and I'm not sure if I've felt that as much now. Maybe I've just been kind of in my own bubble, but wireless seems to have been given an official deprecation in the BEAD NOFA. Fiber is very clearly preferred to wireless. What is your take on that as you, Steve, deal with many wireless clients? Are they feeling upset, concerned? What's their read on what's happening in this space?
So the answer is yes. I do work with the Wireless ISP Association, WISPA, and a lot of their members, many of which, by the way, are getting into fiber and doing hybrid fixed wireless and fiber networks, which is all about what's the best tool for the job. And here it seems like NTIA has decided what the best tool for the job is, without sort of being on the ground and giving more flexibility to the states to prioritize different projects. NextLink, one of my clients and a large company and recipient of CAF support and getting some ARDA support, put out a press release on Monday saying they had done a trial using 6 gigahertz technology and was getting a gigabit by 500 megabits up. And that's wireless fiber in many ways, and it can be deployed more expeditiously, more quickly. I just said that expeditiously, but also at lower cost. Is it future proof? It's certainly present. I like to say it's present proof. And wireless technology has always evolved to keep pace with where consumer demand is. So I'm not religious about fixed wireless. I'm not religious about fiber. I think it's more about what the tool for the job is. But the bigger issue for a lot of our members is the way that the NOFO treats those who use unlicensed spectrum to deliver broadband to a location. So there are 9 million.
Say another 30 seconds about that, Steve.
30 seconds. Okay, so 9 million people are getting broadband over unlicensed networks, so are public safety. But the NOFO concludes that unlicensed spectrum is subject to overbuild through this program. And there's a lot of consternation about that within the WISP industry.
Okay. Go to our remote guest here. Tell us a little bit, Sean, about your observation on the fiber versus wireless conflict, such as it is, or is it no longer a conflict and everyone in wireless is doing fiber, and fiber is, what's your take on that?
Well, I mean, certainly the BEAD NOFO certainly puts its thumb on the scale in favor of fiber. But on the other hand, though, I think there was, and I heard throughout various other workshops and breakout sessions that while I don't know that there's much debate about the ideal nature of fiber in terms of reliable connectivity. I think that debate really is no one's really having that debate. I think it's more a question of particular communities and whether or not fiber is feasible in certain areas, and that's a discussion that is still a very important discussion to have and for communities to consider.
But Drew, I'd like to disagree slightly with my friend Steve. What we agree upon is we're having a Sharon Stone moment on your show here. But I think where we disagree a little bit is that I think that NTIA stressed fiber, and we're all talking about fiber because it's hard, and we've got a lot of money now finally behind it, and you can make the argument that building fixed wireless, deploying wireless is a little bit easier. You don't have to go on the ground, you don't have to get on poles or whatnot. So this is really what the intent of this big financial push is going to be. And ultimately, fiber is going to be the infrastructure that a lot of the wireless has to plug into. Mm-hmm. So I do get why that's where it goes. But I agree with you that on a local community level, communities have to have some skin in the game as to the type of technology that's going to work best for that community.
Well, just to catch our viewers and our new panelist up to speed, we're here with Sean Gonsalves, Steve Curran of Lehrman Center, Bob Knight of Harrison Edwards, and the man of the hour, Jeff Glavinsky, who is the CEO of Mountain Connect, the conference from which we are webcasting this event. Jeff, congratulations on an extremely impressive conference. Tell us your thoughts about the conference overall, and then you can come into the fiber versus wireless discussion.
Okay, well, I just got out of the debate with talking about this very same thing. So no, it's been great. It's been great. I think there's a lot of excitement. We've had an amazing lineup of speakers thus far, and we end on a really positive note with a really good session on digital equity. Mm-hmm. So
that's still to come.
It's still to come. So it's been a really lively vibe here. So been a lot of hard work, but.
Jeff, is it going to be in mud season next time, or can we move it back a little bit? Make sure a few more ski resorts are open besides A Basin.
Well, so here's the dilemma. You want to ski? A lot of people want to golf, right? So if I move it further back, by the way, you got to ski while you were here, so
I did. It was great. You can see from my face.
Yeah. So just to chime in at the tail end of what you guys were talking about, here's something that we don't talk about enough, and that is the fact that we've been down this path before. So Colorado is a great example of what can go wrong when there's no oversight. So if you go back to our BTOP grant here,
BTOP stands for the Broadband Technology Opportunity Program of 2009, the previous version of NTIA's program.
So our BTOP grant was to connect our school districts. So as you might guess, a lot of the rural communities started to plan around how they could build laterals off of this effectively middle mile infrastructure and connect their communities to better serve them. The problem is that we have this propensity to underestimate the cost of building fiber, especially in mountainous areas, right? So we ran out of money, and we ended up with a wireless solution. That wasn't what was promised, right? Not that that was a bad thing. It's just that that was not the intent. Now, right now, there's a pass down in the southwest part of Colorado where they're building, CDOT is building fiber over that pass. You know how much it costs per mile? It's $1 million per mile. So I say these things because we should be talking more about having some effective oversight on these cost estimations, especially in mountainous portions of the country, because often this is what happens.
So why is it $1 million a mile though? Is it because there's a public entity that's deploying it, or is it because of the topography? What's your estimate on that?
Well, it's because they have to bore through granite. Boring through granite is very costly, right? There's not a cheap way of doing that, and they've got a very narrow right of way, but nonetheless, they're still boring through granite.
Okay, so go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say, and to the point that Bob made before, which I think is at the heart of the program, is this is not about a bang for your buck program. This is about a technology solution being driven by the government, and it's not really based on like a reverse auction like we had for Connect America Fund program and the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund programs at the FCC that were really focused on sort of market-based solutions. And so this is a completely different way of looking at the way we're funding broadband going forward.
So what's your view on that? Thanks for bringing that ARDA up. The Rural Digital Opportunity Fund did this reverse auction. It's like a market mechanism where someone says, oh, I'll serve this area for X amount. And someone else says, oh, I'll serve it for this amount less. And so it's reverse auction because instead of the product being bought by the highest bidder, the product is purchased by the government from the lowest bidder.
Right.
So what is your view, Steve? Is that a better one? Why didn't we do that again with IIJA?
So I think it comes down to this. A couple presentations, I have a slide that talks about sort of the philosophical differences between previous programs and this one. So the FCC is an independent agency. They were led for the last several years by someone who very much believed in market forces being able to drive broadband. That was their way of doing things. And then we had a couple things happen. One is this little thing called COVID, and the other one is this thing called elections, and they both have consequences. And the consequence was that we now have a program that's coming out of an executive agency and not an independent agency. And I think that's pretty significant. And the second is the one I mentioned before, which is this is not a market-based program. This is an FDR era public works program. When you put everything on top of not just the broadband component, but everything else that's strapped onto it.
So I don't think you answered the question.
No, you're right. You're right. I didn't answer the question. Let me try again. So, there are folks who are very critical of the ARDA program because it brought to the stage those that are perceived by some as not having the experience or the know-how to be able to pull it off. And that was, kind of a consequence of the way that the rules were put together. But remember, that was a fiber-focused program as well. It favored fiber. It had a lot of the similarities in terms of the way that there's a lot of DNA that NTIA is borrowing from the FCC on this. I think it's too early to tell what's going to happen with a lot of these RDOF projects. And I would say that there are some that are stuck at the FCC that are hybrid fiber wireless networks that haven't been approved yet. And I'd really like to see those move forward because I think they will be successful.
Yeah, can I say something about that?
Please.
So, certainly, from our perspective over at ILSR, the Community Broadband Networks team, I think, you raised this question about, the RDOF route, the reverse auction route versus what the approach that's taken in the IIJA, where the money is being allocated to the states for, various competitive grant state programs. And from our perspective, while it may not be ideal, it's certainly better than RDOF, and primarily because our view is that it gets the funding closer to the local communities, or a better way of putting it, closer to the folks who actually know where the connectivity challenges are. Folks in DC don't know where we talk all the time about the inaccuracy of the FCC maps and the bad data that they have, and so it's really in local communities, we feel, who are closest to the problems and have the best sense of where connectivity challenges lie. And so from that perspective, I think the approach taken with IIJA is a better one than what we're seeing with RDOF.
Thanks for raising this all-important issue of broadband maps. Again, we're going to have a discussion next week on broadband maps and data, which we've done before, and I'm sure we'll do again. But I'd like to get everyone to weigh in a little bit. Like, Sean, you've just raised an excellent point about the local communities know where the connectivity problems are. But isn't that why we're supposed to have better maps from the FCC so the federal government can know too on an address by address level? Or is that simply a mirage? Let's get everyone's take on this, Jeff, and then after we get everyone here, we'll get to you, Sean.
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by a mirage, but
is it ever really going to be a good map? I mean, for example, Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser said that his priority, he wants to make sure Colorado has someone to challenge. He's like ready to challenge the map before it's been finished, right?
Right.
So yeah, why does he say that?
Well, he says that because you're relying here. I think what they're doing with the new map, and certainly you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the problem has always been lack of transparency from providers, and the fact that now we have one company basically, building this new map. Now, the question is where are they getting their data from, right? Is it reliable data? And are we better served, quite frankly, by states actually building their own maps? Because again, I think it's doing this thing that was just suggested here. The state should know where they have gaps. The state should know when they're not getting the data, the real data. The federal government doesn't know these things, right? And so I think if you can, the further closer to the edge that you can bring this, the better maps we'll end up with.
And I will point out the difference between the BTOP and the IIJA program is that BTOP was a national grant program, right? This is more like a block grant, as we used to call things, where the money's going down to the states. The states are going to make the decision about where money goes. But Steve, what are your thoughts?
Let me pick up on a couple of things that Jeff said, which is states should know, but a lot of states don't know.
Right.
And that's because, half of them don't even have broadband offices. Many of them have not even put together broadband programs and haven't done any mapping. And I do think there needs to be a standardized set of definitions of what constitutes an unserved location. What's a location even? I could talk about that for several minutes, but we're not going to do that. It's boring. But what is a location? And so I think having a national map, but having it subject to a transparent challenge is probably a really good idea. And I think it's great that Colorado is going to do what they need to do, which is to make sure that they get this right so that they get every single dollar that they're supposed to get out of this program. The other thing I will say is that, to Sean's point, is that states are closer to where the unserved locations are. But what that does is we now have gone from a kind of a single federal model to 57 models, one for the federal government, 50 states, and 6 different territories. And what does that do to the investment community? You're not looking at federal policy if you're a private equity guy, or if you're looking to do an acquisition. You're not going to look at what are the BEAD rules in a particular state, and do they favor this particular company or do they not, either by getting into the program or staying out of it. So it probably goes a little bit beyond where the mapping is, but I think mapping is at the center of all of this. It's the pivot.
Yeah.
So I agree, standardization is absolutely critical. And if I can throw my municipal hat on, so we at Town of Richfield, about a year ago, we conducted a community-wide survey, to figure out. It was in response to people who were screaming during the pandemic that the broadband coverage was inadequate, and so we conducted a community-wide survey, asking both address data, but what their services was like, who their provider was. We also asked how their wireless coverage was, and where anecdotally their signal would drop and whatnot. So we could really have a really clear picture of where things are, because we know that we can't rely on federal data, and it's going to be a while before there's state mapping and whatnot, and we just can't wait, right? And so it gave us a very clear picture that here we are, a leafy suburb of New York City, and close to 20% of the community is not able to access minimum broadband speeds, and the rest of the community is probably underserved. While our download speeds are pretty strong, it's a stretch to get it to that 20 upload, 15, 16. Like in my home, I get a gig down, but it's like 17 up. Right? That's great, but when the kids are home on the Xbox, whatnot.
What's interesting about this whole discussion is that actually, if you think about the mapping and the information contained within the maps, what's interesting to me is that we don't talk about it from the consumer experience perspective. Generally speaking, it's at the point, the demarcation point at the home, right?
Right. It's at the policy level, right?
Right. Now, that could be completely different than what the consumer is experiencing inside the home. And by the way, that experience is arguably more important.
More important,
right?
So to build on that, right? So we asked, we have some in our community, we have some of the best service from a company out of Bala Cynwyd, Pennsylvania, in the country, and our residents have ranked that service as a D+. Businesses ranked it as a D, and that's pretty significant. When you're trying, look, in one of our main business quarters for the service to go down, once a week while you're trying to process credit card payments, and you have office workers through there, everything's in the cloud. That's really, really significant. So when you talk about the consumer experience, that's everything, Jeff.
Yeah. Steve, Sean, let's get your thoughts on this mapping, and then we'll go to an audience question here.
Well, I mean, the mapping question is an important one. It's easy to be overlooked, and it's going to be a question as to how quickly are these these new updated FCC maps going to be available, because that will set the table, and frankly, the level of accuracy or inaccuracy of those maps will actually have an impact on how much funds individual states get. Of course, each state or territory gets the minimum of 100 million, and then there's this formula where the additional funds will be based on, I think it's some kind of formula about the number of unserved locations in a particular state. So that's why I think that is particularly important. And so the more inaccurate these maps are, there's money that certainly can be left on the table, or that states will miss out on.
Okay, we're going to go for just a few more minutes, about 7 to 10 more minutes. So if you have a question, please provide it. Here is one from Mike Dunn. Thank you for the question. Mike notes that wireless generally doesn't happen without poles, and to liken a gigabit fixed wireless radio with fiber is a little disingenuous. Delivering gigabit broadband via fiber provides ubiquitous coverage. However, effectively doing so with fixed wireless is fraught with obstacles. Does anyone have a reaction to this?
Well, I respectfully have to disagree based on the level of success and reliability that the WISP industry has been doing for 2 decades, and has shown an ability to professionalize their operations, to provide service to first responders, hospitals, community anchor institutions. Many of them, just in the past 2 years, have been successful in raising a lot of private equity money. So I think the Wall Street is convinced that unlicensed spectrum can do the job. And as I said before, the technology continues to evolve to meet consumer demand. There is not right now consumer demand for symmetric gigabit service to every home in the country. Will we be there in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years? People smarter than me may be able to figure that out. But, and that's why I say, this program seems to be leaning, harder in that direction than I think it probably should.
Mm-hmm. But really gigabit, I mean, like, I appreciate that some.
So the question is a question of scale. And if you are doing gigabit service over a fat pipe using this particular spectrum block or that particular spectrum block, it's not going to cover a huge area. So that will require more deployment and access to more vertical infrastructure. There's no dispute about that. But it is, I think, and very generally speaking, an easier thing to do than sometimes negotiating pole attachment agreements, especially if you're not a CLEC. Or
competitive local exchange carrier. You need to be regulated in some way to get access to those poles.
In many states, that's the case. And then you may not have a right of access to get onto those poles. We talked about the cost of trenching in Colorado or in other places. So, you have to look at a lot of different features. And I'm excited about some of the fixed wireless equipment that I'm hearing about and that folks are deploying and doing really well in getting around line of sight obstructions and providing high capacity, great throughput, and good experience for consumers.
So I'm a fiber guy through and through, right? But I think we have to have an adult conversation in the industry about, other types of technologies, right? So if you're running precision agriculture, you can run fiber to the farm, but you can't run fiber to the tractor, right? You can't run fiber to the pig with a Fitbit on it. So you absolutely need wireless. Like New York City, there's no room in the conduit. So fixed wireless is going to be a really important component there. There's one county in upstate New York I was going to visit a client. You drive 40 minutes without a damn cell phone signal, which is really inconvenient when you're wasting it, right? But their fixed wireless is going to be a matter of life and death, when it comes to storm and emergency preparedness, right? Some communities just can't wait, and I think we have to be realistic about how we get there.
Yeah, so I often get asked about my content strategy, and I have always maintained that this conference should be technology agnostic, because fixed wireless is going to be an important technology until we can build fiber everywhere. And I don't know if the money that's out there now is enough to do it. Well, I guess we'll see. The other funny thing about the whole gigabit conversation is it makes absolutely no sense to promote something that you can't experience. And right now, you can't experience it because either you have dated devices, you don't have the right Wi-Fi technology is not at a place where you can have equitable distribution of capacity in the home. So we're talking about things that people can't actually experience.
And Dan Smith makes a great point. Wireless is good if no data caps at an affordable price, because that is a key difference between wireless and wireline deployment of broadband. We're grateful that we can have this wonderful conversation, kind of reflecting on Mountain Connect. We want to be respectful of everyone's time here and planes to catch and so forth. Let's give everyone an opportunity to give a minute or so, quick closing thoughts on what you've taken from Mountain Connect and how that will affect you and help you going forward. So let's start with Sean, and then Bob, Steve, and close with Jeff.
Well, I mean, overall, and I think, all of us can agree, it's an exciting time in this space right now. There's this, historic, unprecedented, this term once in a generation investment being made, which is entirely accurate. And so what we're seeing now is, and what I'm most interested in tracking as it relates to the BEAD money is what's going on in the states. How are the various state broadband offices being stood up? What that relationship will be with NTIA. You heard from Secretary Davidson yesterday morning that I believe he said 25 states have already officially submitted letters of intent to participate in the BEAD program. Another 10 have signaled that they're going to. And then there's 15 states or so that where apparently it's not that clear. In fact, it'd be interesting to find out if there will be any states that don't participate in the BEAD program and leave that money on the table. There's been some rumors of one particular state that I've heard, and the other thing too that struck me too is that the application process up and there we go. That's not my plane, luckily. But the application process is not going to be an easy one, and it's going to require state broadband offices to really be on their P's and Q's. And then also, it was a good reminder. Most folks here know this, but just in terms of managing expectations, that most of the BEAD money is not really even going to be available or be distributed probably until the second half of next year. And then one little tiny thing that I thought was interesting as it relates to the BEAD funding and RDOF is, as I understand it, you can't use the BEAD money in conjunction with RDOF funds. And I believe I heard Secretary Davidson and some other officials say that the NTIA will essentially defer to the FCC as it relates to that. And so anyway, those are some of the sort of the broad strokes. I'm sure I'm missing a few things, but it's certainly an exciting time. And I'm most interested to see what will happen. Some states will get it right. Some states I think will make some huge mistakes and just essentially shovel money over to the giant incumbents, and we'll sort of and the years down the line, people will be wondering why they haven't reached universal access within their states.
We will truly have a laboratory of democracy, as the expression goes, with this program. Bob, your thoughts?
So, historically, Mountain Connect has always been, looking into the future and positioning everyone for the future. And I think this year, the conference had to pivot, if I'm not wrong, Jeff, and focus on the now, because there's a lot happening in the now. And I think, when you have someone like an Alan Davidson here, it takes up a lot of oxygen. There was a lot of great programming that was here this year, so I want to acknowledge that. But my comments really are about a couple of takeaways. Now that the dust has settled from the NOFOs being released, and the party is over. Now it's starting to get real, and so the issue that we talked about before, letters of credit, the 25% community match. So some of the other things we were talking about earlier that are sort of slipping my mind, right now. How the 20% of the money is going to be at 2023, 2024. The other 80%. 2025, 2026 kind of election year. So there's some real challenges. Can fiber be? Can the funds be used as drops? For access to homes, lower income homes. So there's some real challenges. But I think the biggest takeaway was that NTIA, Assistant Secretary Davidson and Sarah Morris and others who were here. They all, came right out and said, okay, we're willing to listen. We're willing to work with you. We're willing to make tweaks to this. And I think that's critically important for the success of this program.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Steve.
So this is actually the fourth time I've spoken somewhat publicly about BEAD since it came out about 6 business days ago or 10 business days ago, whatever. And it's great that every time I do this, I learn from people that I'm around, whether it's these guys to my right and my left and Sean over here, or whether it's folks on the floor. And as I keep learning, I keep coming back to the thought is this BEAD program, it looks kind of like a Christmas tree. And every time I learn something, it's another ornament on the tree, another ornament on the tree. And at some point, does it get so bogged down that the Christmas tree falls over and catches your house on fire? And, that leads to kind of another little metaphor. What if we had a party and nobody came? And that would be, kind of a tragedy of the program if we were not able, if the program became so laden with ornaments that it became, for some of the reasons Bob mentioned, letter of credit match. There's other things like the Buy American program.
Oh, yes.
There's a low cost program for the useful life of the network assets, not just the 4-year funding term. So there's a lot of things people really need to take into account. And I'm pleased, as I said before, that about 2 things. One, that NTIA has signaled openness to talking about it. And second, that those of us here who come from all different parts of the industry ecosystem can sit and be in a place and have intelligent discussions about this stuff. And I compliment Jeff and his team for creating the opportunity for us to learn from each other and to teach each other. And so we can all, make this program successful.
Thank you, Steve. Jeff.
Well, I'm encouraged, obviously, through all the dialogue, the excitement that has been on display here. We have a lot of work to do, clearly. And I hope that we end up providing the education connections to folks that actually need help, right? Because at the end of the day, if we're not doing that, then why are we doing this? Right. So it's all about helping the people who need the help. So, and we're going to continue to try to do that.
Great. Well, Jeff, thank you for letting us barge in on your conference here and have our Broadband Breakfast Live Online from Mountain Connect, Keystone, Colorado. Reminder, next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time, we will be hearing on broadband maps and data. Very, very timely topic. The week following, on June 8th, join us in person in Washington to meet Christopher McLean, the head of the Rural Utilities Service. And on June 15th, we will be at Fiber Connect in Nashville, Tennessee. Join us there. Look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern time. On behalf of Sean Gonsalves, Bob Knight, Steve Coran, and Jeff Kovinsky, I'm Drew Clark at Broadband Breakfast. See you next week. Take care.